If you have ever walked through your own front door after the worst day of your life and realized the people waiting inside were about to make it worse, then stay with me, because what happened to me that night still feels like something I watched from outside my own body. My name is Eleanor Hayes. I'm 39. And until last October, I had spent 13 years as an operations director for a private healthcare company in Boston, the kind of place that called itself a family right, up until the moment it decided you were too expensive to keep. At 4:17 p.m., my manager asked me to come into a glass conference room, slid a folder across the table, and told me the company was streamlining leadership. No warning, no performance issue, no dignity, just 6 weeks of severance, a rehearsed apology, and a security badge clipped off my jacket before I even reached the elevator. I didn't cry in the lobby. I didn't cry in the parking garage. I drove 42 minutes to my parents' house in Wellesley, with my jaw locked so hard it made my head ache, already rehearsing how I would tell them, because 18 months? Earlier, I had moved back in after my mother's hip surgery to help for a few months, and somehow helping had turned into paying the electric bill, the cable, the grocery top-ups, half the property tax shortfall, and most of my younger sister's emergencies. I had told myself it was temporary, that families go through seasons, that if I held everything together long enough, no one would notice how much I was carrying. When I walked in, the kitchen lights were on. My father was in his chair with the financial pages spread across his lap, and my mother was slicing lemons as if she were preparing for guests instead of a conversation that was about to split the room in two. My sister Vanessa sat at the island in a cream coat, scrolling through real estate photos and laughing into her phone. I set my tote bag down and said, as evenly as I could, "I lost my job today." My mother looked up first, and there was no alarm on her face, only irritation, like I had announced the dishwasher was broken right before dinner. "How bad is the severance?" she asked. My father lowered the paper and said, "What about the bills due next week?" Vanessa didn't even look guilty. She just said, "Please tell me this doesn't mean you're going to be around here all day." I finally got the house quiet. I remember staring at all three of them and thinking, maybe they don't understand yet. Maybe shock makes people cruel for a minute. Maybe in 10 minutes this will sound different. Then my mother dried her hands on a dish towel, set it down, and said the sentence I will hear for the rest of my life. "Eleanor, if you're not bringing in income, we can't keep pretending this arrangement makes sense. You need to pack tonight and be out by morning." I actually laughed once, a small broken sound, because I thought she had to be joking. "This is my home too," I said. My father answered without hesitation. "It was, while you were useful." Vanessa finally looked up then, and instead of defending me, she gave a little shrug and said, "Mom's right. You're nearly 40. You should have your own life by now." The absurdity of that coming from my 32-year-old sister, who had never paid her own phone bill for more than 3 consecutive months, almost made me angry enough to speak. Instead, I went upstairs in total silence, opened the closet in the room I had slept in since high school, and took out the navy suitcase I used for corporate travel. While I folded sweaters, I stopped feeling shocked. Something colder and steadier took its place. There was one thing none of them knew, because I had never trusted them with good news that could be turned into leverage. 5 years earlier, after a promotion bonus and 3 years of obsessive saving, I had bought a small cedar-shingled beach house on the Rhode Island coast through an LLC my attorney helped me set up. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't fantasy. It was better than that. It was real, paid for with discipline, rented seasonally, maintained properly, and protected because I had learned early that in my family, any sign of stability became a community resource the second it was discovered. I came downstairs 20 minutes later with my suitcase zipped and my coat on. They were all waiting in the sitting room now, wearing the same self-righteous stillness people use when they want to feel brave about being cruel. I stood by the front door, unlocked my phone, and held up a photo of a gray-blue house facing the water, morning light on the deck, dune grass bending behind it. "Since we're being honest tonight," I said, "I should let you know I do have somewhere to go." Vanessa leaned forward first. "Whose place is that?" she asked. "Mine," I said. "I bought it 5 years ago." For the first time all evening, nobody spoke. My father stood up slowly, as if standing might help him understand the picture better. My mother blinked twice. Vanessa's mouth actually fell open. I kept going, because after the way they had looked at me, I wanted every word to land. While you were asking me to cover shortfalls and pretending I was irresponsible for not being married with children, I was saving. While you assumed I had nothing outside this house, I was building something of my own. So yes, I'm leaving. But not because you cast me out. I'm leaving because I should have stopped confusing access with love a long time ago. My mother took a step toward me and said, "Eleanor, don't be dramatic." My father recovered faster than the others. "A beach house?" he said. "With what money?" I smiled. Not because I was happy, but because the question was so familiar. He had never once asked how I was doing, only how I had managed. "My money," I said, picked up my suitcase, and walked out before any of them could rearrange the story in their favor. In the car, I felt electric, almost giddy. I genuinely thought that had been the ending, the moment they finally understood I was not the failure they needed me to be. I drove to my friend Isabel's townhouse in Cambridge, accepted a glass of water I barely tasted, and sat on the edge of her guest bed, replaying the look on my mother's face. Then, just after midnight, my phone lit up with a message in the family group chat they had forgotten I was still in. Vanessa had typed, "Did you see Dad's face? If she's got some coastal place, maybe this whole thing works out. We can tell her we need a few weekends there after everything we've done for her." My mother replied, "Exactly. Let her calm down. She always does. By Christmas, she'll be paying for groceries again and inviting us to stay." My father sent one message, and that was the moment the fantasy of my little victory died. "Make sure she doesn't do anything stupid with the house before we talk." I read it 3 times. That was when I understood I had not shocked them into respect. I had only alerted them to a new asset they intended to absorb. By 8:30 the next morning, I was in my attorney's office in Back Bay. We reviewed everything. The LLC ownership, the seasonal rental agreements, the insurance, the access permissions, the property manager's emergency contacts. By noon, the locks on the beach house had been recoded, the guest authorization list reduced to one name, mine, and a formal instruction had been sent that no family member was to be given access under any circumstance. Then I met with my financial advisor and pulled apart every thread that still tied me to that house in Wellesley. The internet account was in my name. The electric overflow payments came from my checking account. Vanessa's car insurance had been bundled under a policy I paid because she kept forgetting renewals. My parents' premium cable package, the grocery delivery subscription, the landscaping service for their front yard, even the repair plan for the boiler. Mine, 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 mine. I canceled what I legally owned, removed myself from what I could, documented the rest, and sent a polite written notice that future expenses were now their responsibility. I did not scream. I did not threaten. I just stopped being the invisible wall between them and consequences. Consequences. Over the next 6 weeks, my old company quietly increased my severance after my attorney raised questions about the timing of my dismissal and the male vice president they retained in the same role. I signed the agreement, banked the money, and moved into the beach house for the off-season while the winter ocean hammered the shore outside my bedroom windows. It was the first place I had ever lived where silence felt earned. The calls from my family came in waves. First, my mother, tearful and offended, asking why the Wi-Fi had been cut off without warning. Then my father, furious about the insurance notice on Vanessa's car. Then Vanessa herself, outraged that the grocery account no longer worked and insisting I was punishing everyone over one bad night. I answered none of them. 2 months later, my parents drove to Rhode Island unannounced. My property manager called me while I was buying coffee in Newport and said, almost apologetically, "There's a couple here claiming they're your parents. They say they should have a key." I told him they should not even have the gate code and listened through the phone as my father argued that family had rights. My property manager said, "Sir, the owner has been very clear," and hung up on them before I could say thank you. That should have been enough. But families like mine never understand a boundary until it costs them something public. In January, I met Vanessa for coffee after she texted, "Just talk to me once." She arrived 30 minutes late, wearing a borrowed coat and the kind of expression people bring to negotiations they think they can still win. She didn't ask how I was. She slid straight into the pitch. The house in Wellesley was behind on several expenses. Dad's consulting work had slowed. Mom was under terrible stress. Could I at least cover things until I found another executive job? Could I maybe let them use the beach house for a week, just so everyone could reset? I let her finish. Then I took an envelope from my bag and placed it on the table. Inside was a copy of every payment I had made on that family home over 18 months. Utilities, maintenance, food, insurance, incidentals, things bought and forgotten, then expected again. At the bottom was one number, highlighted, $48,216. Vanessa stared at it and whispered, "Why did you keep track of this?" I said, "Because one day I thought I might need proof that helping you was never the same thing as being loved by you." She tried to cry after that, but even her tears sounded rehearsed. I stood up, put on my coat, and told her something. I wish I had learned in my 20s. You are not in an emergency because I stopped rescuing you. You are in an emergency because you built your normal life on my silence. By spring, the Wellesley house went on the market. My parents told relatives they were downsizing for a simpler lifestyle, but everyone knew what had happened in the vague, hungry way families always know. Vanessa moved in with a boyfriend she had once described as temporary. My father left me. One last voicemail, angry to the end, saying blood should mean more than money. I listened to it while standing barefoot on my deck, the Atlantic turning silver under a cold April sky, and I deleted it before the message was finished. Because by then I understood something he never would. It had never been about money. Money was just the instrument they used to measure my worth. The real eviction happened long before that night. It happened every time they taught me that love had to be useful, quiet, and available on demand. Losing my job didn't destroy my life. It exposed the architecture of it, and being thrown out of that house didn't make me homeless. It sent me home to the place I had built in secret, not out of spite, but out of instinct. Some buried part of me must have known I would need a life no one else could vote themselves into. So when people ask whether I regret not reconciling, I tell them the truth. I don't regret leaving. I regret how long I mistook endurance for loyalty. Tonight I'm telling you this from the deck of my beach house. Wrapped in a blanket, listening to the tide drag across the sand below, and for the first time in my adult life, nothing here belongs to anyone who has ever tried to shame me into staying small. They threw me out the evening I lost my job. They thought I would come back apologizing, asking to be let in, grateful for crumbs. Instead, I closed every door they thought would always stay open, and I learned that sometimes the most important thing you can lose in one night is the illusion that the people who raised you are entitled to the rest of your life.